Hey folks, today we are going to take a look at a game that is very unique and unusual for a number of different reasons, and that is Tragedy Looper. Now, the first thing I want to say is that I apologize if you actually end up liking and are interested in this game by the time you finish this video, because it might be very hard for you to get. As of right now, it is a Japanese-only game. I was actually sent a copy of the game by someone associated with the publisher, Baka Fire Party, along with some English translations so that I could actually play and understand the rules. So know that ahead of time. It's possible that it may be released in the US sometime in the next couple of years, but I don't have any information confirming or denying that. But nevertheless, I think this is such an unusual and unique game that I definitely wanted to review it. So what is it? Well, first of all, it's a sort of anime-themed game. There's actually a manga that goes along with the game, and all of the character designs and all the artwork is anime style and manga style. And in this game, it's actually a one versus all game for 4 players. One person is the masterminds. The other 3 are the protagonists who are trying to defeat the mastermind. And what's happening is the mastermind is orchestrating a series of events leading to murders and suicides and other nasty thing in this city in Japan. And the protagonists are trying to stop him. The thing is, at the start of the game, the mastermind is working off of a script, and there are several scripts that come with the base game, and there are expansions that add more scripts. The mastermind is working off the script that is making all of these different events happen in the city by moving characters around on these different boards and putting different special effects on the characters and initiating certain actions. The players, the protagonists at the beginning of this game, don't have any information about what is going on. None. Zero. Zip. And chances are, in the very first, they call it loop of the game, they will lose, and lose badly. But hopefully they gain some information, because then what happens is the game loops back to the beginning, to the first day, and you have a chance to set things right again. And depending on the script, you'll have a different number of loops, you'll have a different number of days, different events will happen, different characters will be involved, but the whole goal is that the mastermind has to make the tragedy and the nasty events happen every single time over the certain number of loops in the game in order to win. The protagonists just have to win one time and break the chain of loops. So hopefully that already has you interested. I know that it definitely interested me when I read the description of the game, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's a great game. Let's go ahead and do an overview, then we'll come back and I'll tell you what I think about it. Okay, I have to give certain disclaimers about Tragedy Looper before I begin the overview. First off, there are a lot of details to this game, and I can't cover everything. This is just a general overview. Do not use this as a rule book for how to play the game. Second, I have to be intentionally vague about a lot of different things in this game, because the game relies on specific scripts that the mastermind uses. Once you know the details of a script, you effectively can't use it again, so I don't want to ruin any part of the game for you should you ever try to buy or play the game. The other thing is that I actually can't even show you some of the particular components, again, because it might spoil things. So you're just going to have to bear with me on this as we go through the overview, as I just give you a general guideline of how to play. So this game is competitive. It's one versus all for 4 players. 3 players are the protagonists who are trying to prevent a tragedy from happening. 1 player is the mastermind who's trying to keep that tragedy happening every time. When the players fail, they don't lose the game automatically, but they have to go back in time and begin a loop all over again. Each scenario has a certain number of loops, and that's what you're going to use this board over here for. The first column here records the number of days in a loop, and again, this is going to be determined by the specific script. So a certain loop might only have a certain number of days. And then in this next column, we have what are called affairs, which are basically bad things that could happen. This is always going to vary depending on the script, but you're going to put tokens on certain days so that when you get to that day, the possibility of that bad thing happening could happen. So it might be a murder, it might be a suicide, it might be something, because you can actually make your own scripts in this game, it could be any number of random wacky things. Just depends on the limits of the imagination of the script writer. This other column here is for the number of loops, and again, depending on the script, it will have a certain number of loops, and as the players lose in each loop, this will go down. If you ever run out of loops, then you probably have lost the game. However, In certain advanced games, you have the option of a final guess, where the mastermind gives the protagonist one final chance to guess what every character out on the board is, like what their hidden role is. This final gauge here is called the extra gauge, and that is just sort of an extra thing if you ever have a certain scenario or script that you need another gauge for to keep track of something. So it's nothing specific, it's just very general. The game also comes with these sort of general extra cards, A, B, C, and D, which you can use for specific things. Again, that's totally dependent on the script that may or may not need it. Now, other types of components in the game. Each player is going to get a stack of these cards. The Mastermind has a stack as well, but has a couple of extra cards too. These determine the actual actions that you get to do during the game. The players in the Mastermind are not actually represented out on any of the boards. They're just sort of abstract. You're really just trying to influence the other characters that are out there. Each of the boards has a different, so you have these different locations. You have hospital, shrine, school, and city. They always have to be arrayed in the same way. And the different characters, the characters are always going to be different depending on what script you're using. Some of them are used, some of them are not. The script will tell you. And up in the corner, they're going to tell you what location this person can start at. Some scripts will tell you specifically to put a character in a location. Sometimes that's up to the Mastermind. It just depends. But once you have the different characters out here, and actually there's a little cheat sheet on here with silhouettes of the different character cards to tell you who can be where. Because some characters can't even travel to certain spaces, like the office worker can never be in the school. Once you have that set up, once you have that board set up, and the Mastermind knows what their script is, you're ready to begin. Now, the protagonists and the Mastermind have access to a sheet that will be similar to like this. And also, the other disclaimer I wanted to give is that I have a translated English version of the Japanese game. So all of these final components, like this sheet, is going to be different, and on the different cards I put little English paste ups, so that all might look different if you ever have a Japanese version of the game or an eventual North American or European version of the game. But this first step sheets is what you should use for your basic games, and it's going to contain all the sort of general information about what different things are. So here's what all the different characters can do. Here's the different types of plots that can happen. Here are what the different hidden roles are, which only the Mastermind knows what every character is, what their hidden role is, but you at least have access to what the information is. So you may not know that there's a cultist in the game as a protagonist, but you know what they do, just so you can sort of use that ability. Like if you see someone do a specific action, you can look at the sheet and say, oh, that must mean that there's a killer in this game. You also have some more information on the different abilities that those characters have, what all the different counters in the game do, and also just some general tips if you just don't know what to do in the game, which often happens in the first loop. Now, the Mastermind has access to a script, which I can't show you because I don't want to risk giving you any information about the script, but it's a specific set of actions that the Mastermind is supposed to do every turn. There is some leeway, and the Mastermind obviously can do some things that are off of script, but there are certain things that must happen every day in every loop, depending on what the day and loop are. On that script, there's also some more information that is public knowledge to the players, and you're supposed to tell them ahead of time. Like, you should definitely, like, for instance, you can tell them for sure that, okay, on day 4, a murder's going to happen. On day 5, another murder or a suicide's going to happen. You are allowed to give them that information and maybe a couple other things, but nothing else. Once you've got all the setup done, then play begins. Now, first things first, the Mastermind is going to play cards. The Mastermind can play a certain amount of cards out on the board, and you'll play them either on people or you'll play them on the location itself. All these cards do different things, and the Mastermind can actually play cards even if it's not a valid move, can play cards just to bluff the protagonist. So one of the cards says add intrigue +1. So if it's on a person, you get to add an intrigue counter. You can also play this on an location and put intrigue there as well. What intrigue means, again, and I'm going to sound like a broken record here, it depends on the script. You could put a certain amount of intrigue on the office worker, and it might mean say that once a certain amount of intrigue is there, then that person will kill somebody, or will just move. If they're not a killer in that particular script, they'll just move to another location. If you put a certain amount of intrigue on, let's say, the school, then it might mean whoever is there kills the other person. Maybe your script calls for like some sort of haunting or possession. It could be anything you want. Then there are paranoia cards. There's paranoia +1 and -1. These are another thing that can affect the characters and make them act in erratic ways and trigger certain events like murders and suicides, or just having them move to certain locations erratically. Then you have a certain number of movement cards. Now, the Mastermind, I believe, is the only one with a diagonal movement card, but he also has movement cards for left to right and up and down. If you play a movement card on someone, then they just simply move to that in that general direction into a new area, as long as they're not forbidden from doing so. So like I said, the office worker cannot move into the school. You also have forbiddance cards, which always take precedence over any of the other cards when you're determining play order. So forbid paranoia. If you play this on an area, no paranoia can be played on a specific area. But you could also play it on a specific character. If you don't care about paranoia being played on other characters in the location, or you want paranoia on other characters, you can just play it on one specific characters. And of course, there's also there's higher intrigue cards, intrigue +2. There's paranoia +1. There is forbidding goodwill, which is something the protagonists do, which I'll get to in a second. But regardless, you'll put out your paranoia and intrigue tokens if you want. You'll move them around if you want. But you only get to put the cards down at first. Then the protagonists get to put their cards down as well. Now, neither the protagonist nor the mastermind can put 2 of their own cards on the same location, but the protagonist can double up cards on the mastermind's cards. Here's the 3 set of cards, and the protagonists all have the same cards. And they'll put down cards as well. I believe it's either 2 or 3 cards on their turn. Now, some of these are only usable once per loop, like Paranoia -1, that's only once per loop, which means even if you have multiple days, you can only do it once until the loop resets. They have movement cards as well. They have the Forbid Intrigue card, which can really destroy the Mastermind's plans. And they have Goodwill cards. Now, Goodwill cards are pretty important for triggering certain characters' special abilities. Out on these characters, they have these little heart symbols down at the bottom with some more text, and they might have some general abilities as well. If there's a certain amount of goodwill, however many hearts there are, you get to use their special ability. So let's go through some of the other ones here. So we have a Shrine Maiden. If there's 3 goodwill tokens on her, and she's in the shrine, you can remove an intrigue from the shrine. If there's 5 goodwill tokens on her, you can reveal the role of any character in that location, whatever location she happens to be in. That can be a very powerful effect. But remember that this is a time travel game. So even if you get to know these people and put goodwill on them, once you go, if the loop restarts, they lose all of that stuff, including intrigue and paranoia. The girl student, for 2 hearts or 2 goodwill, you can remove a paranoia from any other student in this location. You have the alien, which obviously will only be used in certain scripts. You have for 4 goodwill, you can kill any character in this location. For 5 goodwill, you can revive any corpse in this location, which only an alien could do. You have godly being, does not appear in the game until scripted loop number. 3 goodwill, reveal the culprit of any incident. 5 goodwill, remove 1 intrigue from this location or any character in this location. And finally, just as one more example, we have the Mystery Boy. On a script creation, this character must get a role not specified by any of the plots. So it's just basically a wild card. For 3 goodwill, loop 2 or later, you can reveal this character's role. This ability cannot be refused by goodwill refusal. So there's all kinds of different characters, some of them more generic than others. You have a patient, you have a nurse, and they all do different things if you put the goodwill on them. And then you can use those once per loop. Or it might even be once per day. I can't actually remember that right now. But in any case, you're going to go through that. Now, at a certain point, especially at the beginning of the game, the protagonists have no information on the game. But you're going to put all of the mastermind will put his cards out, and then the players will put their cards out as well. You'll flip the cards over, and then you'll resolve them. After this point, something might happen. If the mastermind has met his secret goal, whatever it might be, like make sure that the nurse is together with the office worker, and then the office worker kills the nurse, or whatever it might be, it's possible that the players will immediately lose. The tragedy has happened, and the loop is over. You have to reset and go down to the next loop. You've effectively lost 1 chance. But hopefully you've learned something. You saw the office worker move to the nurse. You saw the nurse die by being flipped over or turned sideways. Now you know it's probably a bad idea for the nurse to be together with the office worker. Or is it? Maybe it's just that the nurse moved down to the city, and that's the bad thing that happened, and the nurse can't be in the city. You don't know, but you need to learn more and more of this information as you go through the game. And the protagonist, even though everything else resets, the protagonists have that information and they can use it in the next loop. Now, some games and scripts require that you have no table talk, which is to say that during the actual gameplay, the protagonists cannot talk to each other and strategize, but can only strategize between loops. Some scripts, and especially in early games, say that you can just freely talk. That's entirely up to the mastermind and the script. The protagonist must only win in one script. That is to say, prevent whatever tragedy it is, murder, suicide, or both. The mastermind must win every loop. Keep the tragedy happening over and over until the protagonists run out of loops. And there's always all kinds of curveballs thrown by the different affairs that can happen, the different character abilities, and the fact that every script could be different and you can make your own scripts. One person will be the leader each turn. This will pass around. And eventually, the protagonists are either going to win by closing all the loops and without a tragedy happening, or the mastermind is going to have the tragedy occur over and over again until they're stuck in a time warp or whatever, and the game is over for the protagonist. There's a lot I didn't cover, but that, in a nutshell, is Tragedy Looper. Okay, in my intro, I kept using the words unique and unusual, and I don't want to sound like a broken record, but those really are the keywords that keep popping into my head. I've never played a game quite like Tragedy Looper. Don't get me wrong, I've played a lot of one versus all games. I have a geek list for it on Board Game Geek. And I've even played some time traveling games. But the way that all of this is integrated together, and the fact that it's also a storytelling game on top of that, and it all sort of mixes together in a very cool way, with a few buts attached to that. But let's get to that in a moment. I want to start from the beginning and work our way up. Let's start with the rules. Now, I had a English translated copy of the rules, which is basically just a bunch of printouts, so I can't testify as to how the actual rule book would be. There's a lot of information you need to keep track of in this game because essentially you're describing how to play the game from two different perspectives, the mastermind and the protagonist. So in that case, there's a lot to keep track of. But really, the game is very simple. Once you get one game under your belt, it all sort of becomes clear. I would recommend reading the rules as best you can, and chances are it's going to be the person that's the mastermind. That's just the way it worked for me. The 3 games that I played, I was the mastermind every time. It's just the way it worked. No one was going to take the time to learn the rules the way I did. And it helps if the mastermind is the person who knows the rules the best. It even says that in the rules. But if you get a game under your belt, it all becomes clear. I promise you that if you get overwhelmed when you first start playing the game. If this game ever does get brought over to the US, and I hope that it does, the English translated rulebook the actual rulebook would probably be much better because there's going to be a lot of pictures to go along with it. So that helps a lot. And the Mastermind book was fine as well. Very simple to keep track of with the scripts and everything. Everything was very clear once you get that first game under your belt. Component quality is good. The card quality is good. The boards are good. And the artwork is great, in my opinion. Now, this is an anime manga style theme to the game. Therefore, a lot of people are going to be turned off by it immediately. That just seems to be the way it is. It's a very polarizing style, especially amongst board gamers, because some people don't like that Japanese anime manga theme at all. I personally do. I mean, look at my shirt. So that was not a problem for me. Some people in my group didn't like it. Some people did. That's just the way that it's going to go. The theme of the game is by far the best thing about this game. Not just the idea of the time traveling, but the murder mystery, suicide mystery, whatever the event happens to be. And you can make your own scripts in this game, so it could be a lot of different things. It's by far the best thing about this game. Moving the different characters around, they're in different areas and working through different scripts, knowing that tragedies are going to happen. It really appeals to anyone who has ever watched or enjoyed some sort of time-traveling story in the past, book, movie, whatever. And it just works for this. All the boards and stuff look really good, so it really enhances that theme to me. This could probably be an abstract deduction game if you really think about it. Most games could be abstracted out to a degree. This one especially, but because they put that extra effort into actually making a story around this, there's even manga comics that go along with the game, it really works. So theme, fantastic. Now, the mechanics of the game are also very interesting. This is another simultaneous card play. Well, what ended up happening is that the mastermind plays first, then everyone else plays. And there's a lot of bluffing involved. The mastermind can throw pretty much any card anywhere, and even if the card can't actually take effect in a certain spot, like putting paranoia, I might be getting my terminology confused, but putting the paranoia on an area, you can just throw a card out there as a red herring. Putting paranoia on a person that doesn't really matter, that you don't care about. But you have to do those little things after you follow the script, and then you have sort of leeway to do what you want, just to change the expectations of the players. It works really, really well. So even though you're kind of confined by the script, things can change, and that's another thematic thing as well. The timeline changes, your tactics change to keep up with it, to keep the protagonist from winning. As the protagonist, you're trying to deduce as much as possible. And so you have to work together. Now, you have two different ways to play the game. You can allow a lot of table talk, or you can not allow table talk at all. It's recommended in the beginning to allow table talk, and then once you get experience with the game, no table talk except for after a loop ends and you fail, and then you can discuss strategy for the next loop. But that's very important and a very key aspect of the game, because if everyone can talk about what they're going to do, you can plan, okay, I'm going to put my forbidden movement card here, and because you're playing after the mastermind can't do anything at that point. If you forbid table talk, then it becomes really key to know what your fellow players are doing. Should I wait? You only get like one forbidden movement per loop. Am I going to waste that now? But is he going to play one? It's tough to know. You have to queue off of the other players, and the turn order changes, so you never know. Really interesting thing how that works. Again, this is the theme being very tightly associated with the mechanics of it being a deduction game tied to time travel. So the game goes fast. I would say this is faster than you think. Again, it looks overwhelming, but once you play it, it gets very simple. And then even with a higher number of loops, it turns and go very quickly because, well, sometimes it's just because the loop ends in tragedy very quickly. But the protagonist only needs to win that one time. The mastermind has to win every time. So it's the impetus is really on the mastermind to drag the game out, but it doesn't always happen that way. So quick game, and that's a good thing for this. I think it keeps that theme engaging and never gets too boring. I certainly would never accuse this game of being that. Having said all of that, the mechanics, components, everything being solid, this is not going to be a game for everyone. That's just the way it is. And I was very disappointed that a lot of people in my group, and I played with several different people, different types of gamers, just were not into it. I think that this game is going to appeal to people who really like storytelling games and don't care about losing. Now, I don't say that everyone in my group is like must win all the time, but it's not fun to lose. But this game expects that as a protagonist, you will lose, and you need to lose because you need information. You know nothing in the beginning, and that's another thing. A lot of people do not like having a lack of control, especially Eurogamers. The thing that Eurogamers probably like the most, if you were to distill it down, is that when you play a heavy Euro game, you have control. You choose what to do. You choose what resources to grab. You choose where to put your worker, whatever the mechanic is. Now, in some games, there's interaction that prevents you from doing everything that you want to do, and I think that the more interaction like that there is, the less that heavy Euro gamers like those types of games. In this game, the players have no control in the beginning, not at all. You're trying to make your best guess, do the best that you can on that first day of that first loop, and hope that things not work out, because they probably won't, but that you at least get a little bit of information to take over into the next loop. The 3 games that we played, 2 of them ended up with the protagonist losing. The third, it was a very, very close, and I kind of just flubbed it and didn't play as optimally as I could because I wanted players to win. That sounds awful, but the fact is, I was more interested in the experience and trying to see if people can have a good experience with the storytelling of this. But people don't like that lack of control, and people don't like the feeling of, I can't do what I want to do. I'm trying desperately, flailing about trying to get this to work. But to me, that's just so thematic and works so well. But again, I was never the protagonist. I can't be in their shoes. I imagine it would be fine. It would be fine to lose. But even as a mastermind, I think that that's another thing, is that it's one versus all. So people don't like not only losing and not having control, but knowing that there is one player working against you who wants to win and is enjoying that you're losing. I never really enjoyed that the other players are losing because I wanted them to do well and I wanted them to like the game, which is a weird thing. That sounds really, really bad. But the truth is, I like this game a lot. But it's just going to be such a specific audience. You need to be into storytelling. You need to not care about losing. You need to like one versus all games. One person in your group needs to be okay with going against all the rest because it's stressful trying to win that way. Anyone who's played Fury of Dracula and other similar one versus all games, and please excuse me because my dog is eating right there. That's what that noise is. But That's why this is going to be a very specific subset of people that like this game. But I do hope that this gets brought over to Europe or the US. I'm interested to see what kind of... Some rules are kind of fiddly. The game can be fiddly. Some things I'm not totally clear on. I'd like to see if that stuff can get cleared up. And I want to see what kind of appeal this can have. It's very critical that you have a lot of scripts, and I hope that if this game comes over, they include more scripts, because you can only play one script essentially with the same group of people once, because then it's used up. You have to be the same player who's the mastermind has to be the mastermind again with a whole new group of people to use the same script. And you can make your own script, and I'd be curious to see more ideas of how that can work, because that can be a fascinating thing as well. But then again, modern board gamers don't want to put that much work into a lot of these games. So I think there's a fascinating game here. I want to see more. I want to see more from this designer. His code name is just like Baka Fire. But I just love it when a game twists ideas on its head and comes up with something that's just so unique. I'll use that word again. I've played so many games that are just the same. And even if they're okay games, they end up being mediocre because I've played it before. I have never played a game like Tragedy Looper before, and it deserves some recognition. Try it before you buy it if you can find a copy, but it's something to pay attention to, that's for sure. My name is Nick, this has been Board Game Brawl, and I'm reminding you to get out there and game every day and in every way. Take care.